world. And up and down the coast, in America. Ooh, the crackers like to have a conviction. Yeah. Like we just trying to get rid of the Indians, and now they declare they're sovereign over the government. We got to be rid of these savages. Never mind, our standard of living is higher than theirs. We got more acres under cultivation, more spinning mills, bigger corn cribs. Of course, we were here first and settled land. We got better horses and better houses. And so, here we go. That's a better view of the Cherokee Nation that we declared our sovereignty over. And here is what they're after. This is what's the matter. The Georgians wanted. That's here, comrades. That's a middle class Cherokee. See what we can find there. There's a few of these around. Now, this was recreated in Rivers Falls. What to do? The Georgians, it so happened that Andrew Jackson got elected president on a ticket of I'm going to do something about the Indians. We're going to do something about it. So one of the old Georgia legislators, he'd been a congressman in the Georgia Senate, whatever, writes to the president, I think even before he took office, whining. Well, we tried to make a deal with them Indians and they won't sell, they don't know what to do. And they said, well, do directly what you can't do directly, come up to legislation. So what the Georgians got busy did, knowing that the President of the United States would not interfere, they passed legislation. First thing they did is said that they have jurisdiction over the Cherokee Nation, they have jurisdiction over us, and we can't testify in their courts. They organized 10 counties. They sent surveyors out to survey our land. They lottered that off. They had lottery wheels and let people win Cherokee homes. They formed counties. They elected state legislators, 20 of them from the 10 counties that they formed over our land. They elected county sheriffs and they used them as civilian forces to go out and pitch Cherokee people out of their homes and harass them. That was in 30. I think it was about 31 to give you an idea of what was going on. Cherokees are having a baptismal ceremony. They went down to the creek to baptize them. Baptist. And here comes the Georgia Guard, the county, Georgia Goons, and they ride down in their horses right on top of them and said they come to the horses. Cherokees couldn't testify in court, so they had overrun this house right here. Wound up in the hands of the brother of the Georgia Guard. And they threatened to burn it down if people wouldn't leave. There's a big, it's well recorded. They came in with fire to it and the stereo, had a freestanding stereo. So they hassled people out of their homes. When you had that kind of pressure on people, we couldn't govern. We couldn't have council meetings. The government owed us money. They decided that they'd pay it out per capita. So you could get 40 cents if you drive, or maybe it was $1.40, you drive 40 miles to get it. So we wouldn't have money to hire any lawyers to combat it. We took them to court. We won, they jailed missionaries and marched them across the country in chains. There's time enough for these stories, and you all know some of this even. But under those circumstances, a small group of people, and notably I mentioned Major Ridge earlier, he was the guy who had really solidified Cherokee resistance to giving up any more land. I went around and he would go out and give speeches and motivate the Cherokee people to hold fast to what we had left while John Ross and his son were going to Washington trying to work with the people there. And then we found one day it became clear that they were not going to win. They didn't care what the world thought. And we had a lot of support in a lot of places. So a small group of people, rather than for us just to be overrun completely. Andrew Jackson said, you don't want to be like the Catawbas, because they had just resisted and never made a deal, and they were overrun and were just barely living in poverty, had no land base and nowhere to go. We had some of them with us, even up to the time of the law. And he said, that's what's going to happen to you. I'm not going to do anything for you. Told Major Ridge's son, you need to go home and get these people moved. Under those circumstances, a small group of people said, we know we're risking our lives. John Ridge said, but what is a man who would sacrifice himself for his people? I'm going to die with the Cherokee Nation. True. 90% of the Cherokees were against it. They signed a petition that stretched from here to that wall. Took it to the Senate. They ignored it. They ratified it by voter vote. And that precipitated the trail that we cried. And so General Wool, bless his old heart, he resisted the Georgians. You know, getting us moved was going to be a big deal. Cherokees wouldn't, they wouldn't go. You know, they just said, we'll never honor this fraudulent treaty. You'll have to drag us out of here. Pretty much that's what they did. General Wool resisted, and they fired him and tried to find him, and then we got old Fuss and Feathers here, who did the best he could to be civil about doing a nasty job. There we go. There's some of the removal, but here's what I was going to get to. These are the forts that they built. And at this time, you all know that when I talk about Dr. Riggs talking about the climate change, he also talks about the economic climate under which this removal occurred. And at that time, there was no money. It was like a depression. There just wasn't any money circulating. Crops had been bad for several years. And so there was a lot of money in circulation building these forts and hiring them to work in these militias and help with Indian removal. So you can see how many of them, if they're worried, we're finding some of them and being able to market and interpret them. So people wouldn't submit. They gathered them up, they put them in these places, and then gathered them up in places like Ross's Landing and in Charleston, Calhoun, and Fort Cass, and eventually put people on the boats and sent them out. Only one group like that were successful, and then because of the climate, it was a real dry summer, the water went down, the boats wouldn't float, so two groups of them came along and had really bad luck, and then they decided to wait till that fall to leave, and then we decided that we would run it ourselves, but you know, Cherokees always do things better than the federal government does, which is, I realize that's a pretty low bar. Yeah. We wound up removing ourselves, but it froze that winter. You know, it was the hottest summer and the coldest winter, and a lot of people died on the way. The Mississippi River froze, and people were hung up and couldn't get across there. It was a period of that. Now, 1987, almost 150 years after the fact, the Congress of the United States passed the Park Service, National Park Service, with marking, interpreting, and protecting those removal rights. Although there wasn't a lot left to protect, but they were given this mandate. This wasn't a Cherokee Nation initiative, y'all. It wasn't something we dreamed up to do. Two little ladies in Kentucky pestered their congressman, who by the time he got around to it, a senator, to introduce legislation, because they had discovered a couple of townships died in the town, and they wanted to, that was commemorated, and they said, this is a national story, the whole thing needs to be water. So they passed this unfunded amendment and expected probably that it would just go away. But there was a Cherokee guy in the Park Service who steered some money into it and made it happen. And that's, I was new in the Tribal Council, and that's when I got involved. Chief named Clercy, and somebody that's historically inclined selves. Now, I was clueless, but there were some guys out here who did have a vision. I didn't know anything about it. Cherokees, it wasn't on our list to tell this sad story. We had a lot of other stories to tell. But once it became apparent that, well, the Congress is active on it, we better get ahead of it, because they're going to tell us what they'll tell. Because y'all know what one of these will do when you turn them loose. They'll just make something up. And, they'll look up something on the internet. Here we'll go. You can't go on it. So, and at this point, I want to kind of share with you what we found to be Cherokees were a large, diverse group, and it's hard to find. We do find consensus, but not all Cherokees think alike. So I don't speak, or any of us don't speak for all the Cherokees, because you know what would happen then. Well, that old fool, I'm speaking for me. But these are truths that I come to know that almost all Cherokees feel. It's what we share with the people. When we look at this, all these routes, different groups going different ways. And the Park Service is going to mark some of those. And we're going to have to research that in the way the Cherokees do. So we find that not only in Kentucky, but all across the country, lots of people were interested in exactly where did this come through my community. Those people are our partners. They're the people that read our bike riders and bring water, have a barbecue, and fish fry, and support us and help us network with local communities about where can we put up a marker about this, where can we have an exhibit in the museum. And so when we go to talk about this terrible tragedy, this sad story, we tell them, when we come here and we commemorate this, we're not doing this because we want to capture our ancestors in the role of victims. We're not doing this because we want to, because they didn't let that tragedy define them. Yes, they were victimized, they were treated horribly, but they didn't let that define them. Their definition was, by God, that happened, but with God's help, we'll overcome it, and we did. That's the story that we tell, is that we tell, when we do this, not to capture them in the role of victims, and we sure don't do it because somehow we want to appropriate victimization to ourselves. And, oh, woe is me! 180 years ago, my ancestors were mistreated. Now I'm a victim, and I'm especially privileged. And the whole we have to destroy Western civilization because we've been victimized. That Cherokee, that's not how we approach the world. That attitude didn't preserve the Cherokee Nation. When we commemorate this, we are honoring that group who did preserve the Cherokee Nation and did pass it on to the next generation in good shape, a strong political entity capable of protecting its interests and perpetuating our history and our culture and our place as a political entity, a people. We honor them when we, and all of these Trailblazer events give us as Cherokees an opportunity to interact with these local communities where, you know, the Historical Society for the Trail came from my family in Missouri. It gives us an opportunity to go there and tell them who we are and what we've done and how we're still here. And so now, we can cover with you all a little bit about that generation. And so many people died. It wasn't, not everybody survived, but the Cherokee Nation survived. That's a painting in Jack Baker's wall. Removal. It shows it from spring until winter and until from. Shows the seasons as they cross into Daniel first year. And that's George. Here we go. You see where our area is there. We get there, we have the Constitutional Convention. We have to bring ourselves together because there's almost a civil war going on. But in the midst of that, here we go. 5 years in, we build the Supreme Court. The oldest public building in Oklahoma, built by the Cherokees 5 years after the movement. It stands today as a symbol of the reverence Cherokees have for rule of law. And it houses an exhibit about the judiciary in the top, and in the bottom it houses an exhibit about the Cherokee Press, which actually occupied a lot longer than it was ever occupied as a courthouse. The 12 years after we got here, we built 2 seminaries. And such was the Cherokee emphasis on education. You know, we want to retain our language, we want to retain our culture, but we're very practical. And to survive in the world as it was, not as we might have wanted it to be, you had to have young men prepared for government service to be able to stand on equal ground with the politicians in Washington and as business people. So that was like when you got done there, you were ready to go in business or to med school or law school or something. And for women, first, well, I got it backwards. Here's the men's school. The women's first institution for higher learning for women west of the Mississippi River, modeled on one of the high-end girls' boarding schools back in Massachusetts. They just went there and brought the teachers here. The idea was that Cherokee women needed to be able to be on the same social standing as the ladies in D.C. When the men had to go to Washington, we needed to be equipped to be as confident as anybody else that was in town. And so we learned to, and that was the purpose. It was a girls' finishing school, as good as any on the East Coast. And a few people prospered to the point. That is the only surviving antebellum mansion in the Cherokee Nation. We call it Hunter's Home now. It belonged to the daughter and son-in-law of the second richest man in the Cherokee Nation, Chief Ross's brother, Lewis Ross. And so those houses like that were scattered all about Park Hill in South California, and Fort Gibson, at Weber's Falls. There were houses on this order. Of course, that's the rich folks. Not everybody lived on that level. But that house was built in 1845. We're just now barely getting settled down from Civil War. So we had a few good years. After 1845, the disruption that we had because of the removal, people wanted to kill the treaty party, all that retaliation. We're not proud that President Polk had to negotiate the peace, but he did, and it took, and we prospered for several years. And then here comes the Civil War. Chief Ross preached neutrality and tried to hold us to that, but that whole rift between the treaty party and the people who removed earlier, it kind of split again when the Civil War came. So a number of Cherokees sympathized with the South and were already raising troops. The feds had agreed to put these forts up at Fort Gibson and at Fort Smith to protect us from Osages and just generally to keep peace. As soon as the Civil War broke out, they abandoned this. And the Confederate States then sent Albert Pike. Y'all see him pretty good? Have you seen him? This is who the Confederate States sent to lobby the Indians to join us. And the Cherokees resisted. We were the last ones to get moved out, and we were the last ones to sign up with the Confederacy. After the feds had abandoned us, the Choctaws had gone with the Confederacy, Arkansas has, Texas has, we're surrounded. Choctaws and Chickasaws do. So in a move to keep the Yankees from burning us out, we joined the Confederacy. It was a short-lived alliance. There were a few battles. Albert there in his dress, he was at the battle, but he couldn't. He's so fat he couldn't sit on a horse, so they had to build him a carriage. He had a horse-drawn carriage that he went out like the rest of it. He's a mess. Moving from that. There's a lot of detail about the Civil War. That's a depiction of the Creeks set up a camp down south of River Falls and blew a hole in the Yankee steamboat line, bringing supplies up to Fort Gibson. And they sunk it, and the Cherokees went out there and got all the goods. There was a lady that lived at the district earlier in Elizabeth. She had baby clothes made out of cloth. So there's a lot of stories about the Civil War that are very interesting, but can't go into all that today. Talk about the lifestyles of the plantation Cherokees another day. They're very socially conscious. They're very southern and just refined. The Civil War came, and then the Reconstruction Treaty. And the Cherokee Nation's power of it. Everything's been burned down. Rich Joe Dad's house was burned down. Remember Martha Vaughn talking about the family she was from the Hanks family. She got in trouble when they went to Washington to the White House because she was throwing a fit out the Lincoln bedroom. And come to find out, she's just a little girl, but she heard the granddads telling the stories how when they got home, the Yankees had burned everything, and all that was left was one chicken, and it didn't have no feathers. And she got in trouble because she didn't want anything to do with Lincoln. She heard the family blame it all on him. Not only is the Cherokee Nation a power level, they enforced the Reconstruction Treaty. And that's notwithstanding, you know, I didn't go into it very deep, but we joined the Confederacy, and as soon as it was convenient, 2/3 of the Cherokees went over to the Union and fought with distinction and honor with them. But when it came to Reconstruction Treaty time, we weren't given credit for any of that. It's just another good excuse to wrangle some concessions from the tribes. And so we wound up with this Reconstruction Treaty. Article 7 said there would be federal court set up in our territory, in the Indian territory, for jurisdiction over non-Cherokees. We didn't have jurisdiction. Worst thing you can happen is try to govern a place with a bunch of people and you don't have jurisdiction. Article 11 let the railroad come in and gave them rights of way all along the tracks. When and if they made provision for it, when the tribe would allow it. And actually, they forced us into it. We had we had to accept them friendly tribes. That's how we wound up with Shawnee Cherokees and Delaware Cherokees. And that part really didn't hurt us. They've been good citizens. That hasn't been, that part didn't work. And they had to go somewhere. Those people, although they were civilized people, they didn't want in Kansas or wherever they came from. So they can live with us and did well. We had to give up the Cherokee out. You know, when we moved down here, we had a right to a slice of land about as wide as the panhandle of Oklahoma. All the way, you know, as far as the United States had jurisdiction, we were supposed to have jurisdiction. We had to give that up. Have some military post here, which we did. The thing that really hurt us was Article 20 that said when we requested that there would be a survey of our lands and the law to individuals, because until this time we owned our land in common. And so by 1872, here come the railroads. By 1894, we've got 250,000 whites living among the tribes. That's the other tribes. And all this while, the courts, whenever cases come up, they're further limiting the jurisdiction of the tribes. And one of the worst things that happened to us was that the feds not only had the jurisdiction, they've taken our jurisdiction over black people on themselves. They would not get intruders out. Those people were supposed to have permits. They were supposed to come here and go when we told them they wouldn't go. The feds wouldn't remove them, and they would not let us remove them. Now, if that sounds familiar, they weren't inherently evil people. Most of them, probably 9 out of 10, but the 10% that were bad were really bad. And they wreaked havoc. We became a place that had a reputation for lawlessness. And then all the Yankees get together, all the do-gooders at the Lake Football Conference about what to do about the Indian problem that the feds had created in the first place and didn't ask us. We could have told you, get them out. That's all you got to do, remove the intruders. But they wanted what Cherokees had, same way they did when we took our land here. For a period of years, years, and it's so bad that the feds finally created a special court and bring in old Judge Marker. Think Rooster Cogburn, True Grit. That's what that was all about. They finally had to put in a special court to clean up the mess they made in the Indian Territory. We're outnumbered in our own country 6-1. Judge Parker, he was the one. He said, there's a lower percentage of crime among tribal people than there are among white people. Their conduct should be held up as a standard to these white people in the states surrounding them. The Indian agent reported in '95 that there's not a pauper among them. They've all got a horse to ride, they've all got a house. I wish the states around us could say as much. Oh, we had 126 neighborhood schools besides those 2 colleges. And there was no literacy in the Cherokee Nation. We built this in 1869. This is the courthouse where we used to have, and right behind us where we do it now, the State of the Nation every year. Here's the layout of the tribal boundaries. Now, the government, let's see what year that was. 1893, they passed the Dawes Act. Now, that's the act where they formed this, they send out this commission, here they are, and said, you go out here and get the Indians to agree to this allotment and divide this land up. So they sent them out to negotiate. Well, our chiefs just shuffled one foot and then the other, and we never did agree to do it. So by 1898, the government just said, well, we have military power. We're going to do it anyway, and shoved it down our throats. That's when Redbird Smith, the Wisconsin leader, led that. They jailed a bunch of guys just because they wouldn't agree to take allotments. So we're not going to do it. You're going to destroy us. Cherokee, they said our people are not adapted to this. Yes, you see the mixed-blooded elite, or the elite, not all of them were mixed-blooded, the people that were highly educated in the culture to an extent. We hadn't lost what was Cherokee, but we knew how to deal with it. Well, y'all can just make it. And they said, no, we can't. So they forced the allotment on us. By 1906, they pretty much had it done. They were supposed to have it done before me. And so, because they couldn't get all of our land divided up so they could steal what didn't go to individual Cherokees outright, the government had dismantled our courts, dismantled our government, left us kind of in a vacuum, but they passed an act in 1905 that said the tribal governments would continue in full force and effect, but their full force was just we had some elected chiefs who had no power because they didn't have a council and we didn't have any jurisdiction. But it did leave us a legal thread that we got back 2 years later. So, under those circumstances, in 1906, tribal people got together, the 5 tribes, and I thought the Osages were included in that. And there's a whole study on this, although the original papers burned up, but we do know quite a lot about it. They came together, they formed a constitution, and petitioned the federal government to come into the United States as an Indian state. And the Congress would allow it, because it was going to be too many senators from one party or the other, because the Oklahoma territory just to our west, don't you see, they were both going to come in with Democrat senators, and so they wouldn't, but they forced us to become part of Oklahoma. I'll tell you, Dr. Dale, an early Oklahoma historian, came along, and he found this story somewhere, Dr. Strickland. dug it up. There was a lady named Mary in a white husband, having her life. When it was time for the Statehood Day celebration, he said, Mary, let's go to town and go to the celebration. She said, no, I'm not really that enthused about it. You go ahead and have a good time. Visit everybody in town. So he did. Eddie came home and he was sharing it over before they went to bed. And he said, well, Mary, there is no more Cherokee Nation. No more state. And she went to bed and cried all those years of resisting, it looked like it was over. And what did happen was tragic, because between 1906, when they got the allotment in 1936, Cherokees lost 75 to 90% of them. I think it was more like 90%. Because we had no government, no people, nobody to advocate for the traditional people who didn't speak English and didn't have a lot of education, didn't understand private ownership of land, and they put them under the state courts and Angie Dover as long as rivers flow. I think it's the name of the book. She did an expose that had to be published at Princeton because the crooked politicians in Oklahoma controlled the OU press. So she didn't let them publish it there. She said it was destroyed. And it's a complete expose. She finds there's no doubt what happened. They put these Cherokee orphans and people that didn't speak English under the state court, and they appointed them a crooked guardian and screwed them out of their land. And that's what happened to Cherokee land. So by the 1920s, when the rest of the country was, what we call it, rural, people were starving, dying of malnutrition. Because you know what happened was that people who had done, they raised a big garden, they had a corn crop in the holler, they could hunt and they could fish and they could gather berries and nuts. And full-blood people, traditional people, knew how to harvest a lot of stuff out of the woods. Well, when you get all these white people overrunning it, and you don't own anything, and your neighbors don't own anything anymore, they put up fences, and you can't get out there. You can't live like that anymore. So they did the Marion report. Somebody finally had thought enough to see what was going on. We didn't have to go. They had come in and said, we have to dismantle the tribal governments because there's disparities. Those rich chiefs own everything in the pulpit. They didn't understand that left on our own, if you were ambitious, you could farm more, you could raise more, and if you didn't, you could live quietly in the hills and live an old traditional Cherokee life, and it all worked pretty good. But you had that element of, well, you're too rich and you're too poor, and blah, 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 and they destroyed thriving place where everybody had a home. There wasn't any pauper among us. So under those circumstances, in 1936, when we started to do all these New Deal programs under Roosevelt, they made provision for tribal groups to be able to administer some of that money themselves. And at that point, the Cherokees never did buy for that reorganization deal. They never would do that, but they did form some corporations to get hold of some federal money to try to help the situation. And at that time, they call this the dark days of the federal era. The age, from statehood until up in the 30s, the dark days of the federal era, when they were trying to eradicate the tribes and get rid of us all together. During that time, the Cherokee Baptist Association was the backbone of most Cherokee communities. The Cherokee-speaking church was where the community came together. There were also ceremonial grounds, tradition, people to worship traditionally. at the starting grounds, those people, the people who were alumni and descendants of the alumni of those colleges, they had an organization that brought together a lot of influential people who were thriving in the new state, who could help a lot. And so they would have big gatherings. And so the president, they had been appointing as a chief for a day just to sign name titles, but finally in 1941, President Truman appointed Chief Myler, who was going there. He was a wildcatter who had a fortune. He was also head of the former seminarians, and he used that position to bring in other Cherokees and form an advisory council, so he would have more than just a president when he wanted the support of the Cherokee people. And so he used that, and he had a young lawyer named Bill Keeler who kind of came in, and when Chief Myler got to Chief Keeler, who became president of the Force Patrolman during most of his time as chief, he became the chief and continued to advocate, continued to try to press some of our legal claims, and finally he got some money together from one of those claims. They had always been given out on a per cap basis. They would never let us have any money that belonged to tribal people in a lump sum. The Chief Keeler outsmarted him. He put all the money in the bank and the feds, they'll shovel their feet for years before they'll hand out, even if they're not divided up, and it accrued interest, and he used the interest to establish the modern day tribal government. That's how he got ahead of the feds. He served for years as the president, and he finally had the satisfaction of being elected in 1971. They let us select our new chief, and he had the satisfaction of getting to be elected by popular vote. And then he quit, and he took another lawyer who was helping with the housing authority, whose dad had been in the tribal council, Ross Swindler, who was a banker, and he was the head of him. And at that time, during Ross's term, the first thing we didn't have a mechanism for even electing a tribal council, let alone have a constitutional convention, but he sent people around, and he came up with one we got Cherokees to ratify. And when I asked him about it, he said, well, we weren't thinking of a real fully fledged tribal government. We just wanted an entity to administer some funds so we can get hold of something and help people living on dirt floors with no plumbing. So it wasn't the best. And it did have provision to look at it again. 20 years, you put it to a vote with the people in the Constitutional Convention. So during Ross's time, we started electing tribal council people. The feds collected more money's available, and so Ross, he didn't have to employ his public during that time. He got real sick. His deputy chief decided he was crazy and he would run against him. So Ross he got the medicine people and got over his cancer, and he had to have a running mate. And so this Republican banker got a hidden social worker named Wilma Mankill for his running mate. Kind of balanced the ticket, don't you see? And Wilma was really good with her husband about getting out and helping Cherokee people organize themselves. And she said, look, we can get some help, but we're going to have to do it ourselves. That's what attracted me to her. And during her time, we had some bingo halls. In her first full term as a Ron, she served 2 years for Ross's time. She got past where we could elect our tribal council people by district. So in 91, that was the first time that we did that. And I can remember being in council, we had 3 bingo halls that averaged $1 million a year apiece in profit. We know we were in tall cotton. We had some money of our own. We set up corporate boards, we set up entities created under tribal law to manage our businesses with their own board of directors. Try to pull it away from councilman so-and-so and his neighbor's nephew. You know, try to pull politics out of it a little bit. But we're Cherokees, it's pretty political. We won awards for accounting. And I think it was in Williams time we started having the government make provision because of the Republicans. President Nixon has really pushed that. Let the tribes manage these programs for their benefit. Let the tribes manage instead of the BIA. That worked wonderful. And we always won awards for how transparent all of our accounting was. We could keep money straight. We used to tell me, said, Cherokee people may not all of them in the woods be that sophisticated, but they know what their office is doing. And they do. They're not we had that constitutional convention in '75, and we adopted a constitution that says you got it. So during the second term, it fell out our law to put to a vote of the people, do you want to have a constitutional convention? And it happened at that time that we were pretty much in the middle of a constitutional crisis. It was and I'm not going to go into it because I was in the middle of it. And we managed to do it, despite the fact that the council was divided, the chief and the court were at each other. We were just more divided all than we have been since the removal. But during that mess, we managed to come together, get the right people in charge, and have a constitutional convention that, when we started, I can't remember how Jay handled it. He wound up being the chair. He's a banker from Oklahoma City from the old Cherokee family, and a guy with a lot of oratorical prowess himself, probably the best Cherokee speaker since Major Ridge. And we just said, this is my paraphrasing, this ain't the British Parliament. There's not going to be any shouting. This is going to be a dignified proceeding. And we owe it to our ancestors to keep it that way. And that's what we did. So it took us 9 long days to formulate the Constitution in 1999. And since I was up in the middle of all that mess, I'm not going to try to narrate in because of time. I'm going to stand here, but y'all will get tired of listening to me pretty soon. So what I want to do at this point is just move forward to the present day. I'll give you just a second. So I'm going to move forward to State of the Nation, the Saturday before Labor Day last year. It's almost time for another. And we'll pull some statistics, some numbers from the Chief's State of the Nation address. Our budget was $3.8 billion. We got 6,200 governmental employees, and our businesses employ 7,500. We're going to build a new Hastings Hospital. This is the med school. It's on the tribal medical campus in Powell, where we train doctors of osteopathy who are going to take training do internships or residency, whatever they do in our hospital, 400 million. New hospital. And we've had 158 million for other stuff. We've got a meat packing company. Cherokees that raise a cow or something can take it and have it processed. 128 community centers across the Cherokee Nation we talk about. Usually prefab buildings with restrooms and kitchen facilities like Wayne Church Fellowship, place for people to come together for language classes, crafts classes, community meetings, historic groups, whatever you need in the Cherokee community. We're putting up cell towers. I'll see if I can find the, right here. We're on the map now again because Joseph Arthur, your phones, you can put Cherokee language on there because the Cherokee guy designed history without sport and tribe particularly. They did get behind him, but so complicated, I don't think anybody understood it. But Joseph did, and he got us where we're part of, we're on the map. When you pull up maps now, they're going to show the Cherokee Nation. Well, we never called it a reservation until the Gulf Pacific. Now we did. Besides all that, you all, the Cherokees are such an integral part of each local rural community. You got Cherokees on the county commissions, on the school board, the county officials, and the state legislature, and the government, the Cherokee government. We collect money for tax, but we put that money right back where it would have gone for roads and schools anyway. Maybe we've got the formula a little different, but we contribute. When we built a casino in Catoosa, too much pressure on the local transportation, we built it in the chain. Cherokees took care of it. They helped the county commission wanted to pave the road or repair the bridge. It comes to the Cherokees for engineering or assistance. So we donate hugely to fire departments and to school systems. And having done that, it gives us a say. And one of our main priorities is preservation of our history and our language. That's and so back to that. Everything we go with the previous generation, they overcame, will overcome. It will always be easy. And the chief, in his message, said, "We are a great people whose triumphs are greater than our tragedies." I believe you all with that. Thanks for having me and share all this with you.